Okay, I think we have all of our technology issues figured out for our technology. Yes, we're overcoming barriers to technology. Can everybody hear me even in the back if I don't use the microphone? I have a mom voice, I have a teacher voice, but I always like to ask, I don't like speaking to a microphone because then a lot of people are over here going, ah, you're so loud. But as long as everybody can hear me in the back, we've already tested out our participants on Zoom, so I know they can hear me as well. I want to thank all of you for coming to this session. As I can see, we're getting to a point where we're only going to have standing room left, which tells me something that helping providers overcome barriers to technology is not a Nebraska specific problem. It's probably a problem that you guys are dealing with every day. There's a couple seats up here, or feel free to just drag a chair in the back if you don't want to sit in the front. I know it can be, sometimes people don't like to sit in the front, so. I am Brandee Lengel. I am with the Nebraska Early Childhood Collaborative, and we have a family childcare network. Like, I see a lot of familiar faces from Zoom calls and meetings of practice. So I think I'm in good company here in this room with lots of people who are working with childcare providers. Just a little map of the United States, if you don't know where Nebraska is. We are pretty much smack dab in the middle of anywhere you're going to be flying to and from. So we call that the flyover states. But this is just another little map of Nebraska, and just some context. About 80% of our state live in the eastern part of the state, like right next to the border. So we have Lancaster County and Douglas County hold the majority of our population. And so we're very rural. So these are our two, what we call urban areas, but those of you from actual urban areas probably would not consider 1 million people our urban area, our largest city in Nebraska. So just a little history, and I always like to start with a little context just so you know where I'm coming from, because my perspective may be completely different than yours because I come from a different state. So we started at NECC working with family childcare providers about 2 years ago. We started with the All Our Kin Business Training Series, recognizing that family childcare providers in Nebraska had little to no formal business training for their program. We were definitely seeing that as a need. We formally launched our Family Childcare Network in the summer of 2020. So right now I consider us kind of in our toddler years. Like, we're just running around crazy and we don't really know everything we want to be doing. And so we're still, I would say, really young. The other thing I would say is we don't have this figured out. So I hope if you came to this session going, I hope she has all the answers, I'm sorry, you're going to be disappointed because we don't. We've tried a lot of things, and I think I can give you a lot of lessons learned, as well as there is just a wealth of information resources in this room. So I'm hoping to do a lot of workshopping. This is kind of a bigger group for work. There's a couple seats up here. Just what you want, sit right in front. But I'm really hoping we have some time to just have some really great dialogue. I'm a very informal presenter, so if you have questions, just yell them out, raise your hand. We can make sure that we get to everybody's questions. I also have never presented to a room full of people and people on Zoom before, so I'm feeling a little self-conscious about where that camera is. Right.
Sorry, you can't see the you can't see it online.
They can't see the PowerPoint? I wonder if you want to go grab him.
Yeah, I'm just letting them know we're working on it.
Okay. So just a little bit more about our family childcare network. We are designed in 3 tiers of service. So we have tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, although we don't use that language with providers anymore because they were getting a little wrapped up in the tiers. And if any of you have a QRIS system that works on a scale, they automatically want to get to that highest level. And that's really not the way our family childcare network is designed. So our tier 1 really is what we would have be our lightest touch of service. So we have the CCA Global, network hub. We have a newsletter. Providers can call. We have a phone number and an email they can call to ask questions, but it's a very light touch. Tier 2 is really a collection of services and programs that we have. We have the AOK Business Training Series. We have a licensing toolkit program. We have a great software technology called Pi for Provider that allows providers to use to determine their childcare subsidy billing. It's just a whole host of programs and services. And then our tier 3 really is about our childcare management software. So we use Wonderschool, although I think that this information really can translate to any software that you're using. And even if it's not childcare management software, sometimes it's just a matter of getting providers to feel comfortable enough to log on to a Zoom or use any sort of technology to run their program. So I like it when I talk to providers about doing their business in Excel, and then they are just like, I don't know what Excel is. So I think it really could translate to anything. I will also say too, we did have a strategic focus to start with family childcare providers, but we are moving into helping more childcare centers because they really have very similar problems with finding access to technology and to running their business. There's lots of pedagogy information, and all of our step up quality, our quality rating systems are really about the quality side of running a program. But if you don't have a strong business, you're never going to be able to be successful. So I think we're at a large enough group now that I don't think we can really do introductions one at a time, because I do want to have some time to get some other things. But can we just take like 5 minutes, have you introduce yourself to the people at your table? If you could quickly just say your name, what state you're from, if you are part of a staff family childcare network, and maybe just how many providers you're serving right now. Good. Give me 5 minutes.
They're working on it.
Okay.
It's the business side of running a movie business. It's a first startup, but then there are some spaces so you can go back and do the 101 and the 201 and the 301 and so refining your marketing.
You gotta get out.
I watched about 8 miles. Yeah, I was like,
There's a couple seats up here.
Central
Okay.
Where they can use their support the provider, but not like understand how to
And so all of them is visible at their face, right? And their
Barry, we should.
I got it.
Okay. Okay.
Like it works. Let's see. Hey, got it. Thank you.
Sorry, I was late. Let's try it
It's
late.
okay.
Does everybody get a chance to introduce themselves? Do we get around the tables? I know some tables have a few more than others. Okay. One other thing I forgot to mention, because that's why I have a PowerPoint, so I don't get completely off track, but we do offer our programs and services all across the state. One of the great unintended benefits, which you're not going to hear that saying very, unintended benefits of COVID was that we had to deliver everything that we were doing virtually, which allowed us to do that across the state very quickly when we got launched. We also do offer almost all of our programs and services in English and Spanish. So, and we can talk a little bit more about challenges and barriers for our English as a second language providers, or English is not their language at all providers, because those are some unique challenges as well. And then just another thing to note is that everything we offer right now is free. So we are lucky to have, I wouldn't say enough funding, but we're lucky to have significant funding that we're able to offer all of our programs and services to providers for free. But that isn't always going to be the case. And so we have to really think about sustainability and how we can make that happen for the future. Okay. I don't think we can really talk about challenges and barriers for providers without talking about the challenges and barriers for staff family childcare networks. So I know a lot of, like I had just said, a lot of you right now have funding because there is a lot of federal funding, there's a lot of state funding that's available for early childhood. This is the time in my career I never ever thought I'd see. But it, again, is not always going to be the case. So really thinking about how you're going to have continued funding. We have a lot of providers, I think that was their first question they asked, like, how long are you paying for this? Because they don't really want to spend all the time and effort and energy if it's only going to last a year or two. Really, what is your reach? I think sometimes we want to deliver across all programs, across the state, but sometimes really we have that limited funding or staff capacity, and it really needs to be focused in on one area. Some of you I know are representing maybe a county or a city where your staff family childcare network takes place. So how do you deliver services in one county, but you have someone who lives across the road who lives in a different county, and then they're not eligible for your programs and services? I want to talk just a little bit about participation and incentives and how we get providers to take advantage of all these programs that we're offering. In the beginning, we highly incentivized participation. And there were some good things about that. And then there were some real challenges with doing that. And now that we're not able to offer as many incentives, some of the providers are really feeling like, well, why should I keep participating if I'm not getting X, Y, and Z? So I think we can talk more about that as a challenge for providers as well as for our staff family childcare networks. Staff capacity, I think, is a big one because I have a lot of great ideas. I know all of you do too, right? But how are we going to implement that? How many staff do we have working for us that can be working like one-on-one with these childcare programs? And also their scope of knowledge. I don't know about any of you, but I've had a hard time finding staff that come with the business side of childcare information already. So then it's a matter of trying to get them trained and up to speed. And I don't know any of you, but I'm like having serious Tom Copeland like problems. Like he is retiring. I don't know what we're gonna do. Like the world is coming to an end. There's no one to take his place. I know he's leaving behind and he deserves a retirement so badly, but I feel like I don't know where we're going to get this information in the future to train our staff so that they can train providers. I've also just the data and the return on investment. Our funders are asking for us to prove that everything we've been doing works. And then we have to collect that data. And do we have a system as staff family childcare networks to be able to prove that what we're doing works? Like we know it works, right? We know that all these systems and supports and services that we're putting into place work. But how do we show that to a funder in a language that they can understand? Changes in technology, it feels like to me like once we get providers on board and we finally get them trained and up to speed, then the technology changes. And so not only do we have to go back to the provider and say, now you have to learn something new, then we're all also having to learn it ourselves. So that's definitely a challenge. And then how do we layer those services and how do we layer the supports that we're offering to make sure that they're not learning in entirely different systems of technology. So like how, if they're already entering information on child attendance into one platform, how can that just translate to another technology platform that we're offering? What am I missing? Other challenges that you guys have experienced just in your family childcare networks?
Fear. Complete fear is,
Oh.
it's.
Hi,
How are you?
we met on Zoom. A job meeting. You're right, absolutely.
It is
But is it our fear or is it the provider fear or both?
both.
Exactly.
And that means that we're gonna be in their business and they don't want us to be in their business. And that's a challenge at many levels.
I saw another hand over
And
here.
the equity gap with access to media in general. How are we
Absolutely.
gonna bridge that? Yeah.
Exactly. And think that map that I put up, like we have counties in Nebraska that don't have internet. Like literally don't have internet. I can't even imagine how you function on a day-to-day basis without that. But there are families that don't have internet. There are parents that don't have smartphones. So how do we address that equity? Did you have one?
I think we've had a combination of both fear and access. Family childcare and our state actually wasn't allowed to do childcare management systems. Did work with the state to actually do like regulations to make sure that they could use it.
You're not in Nebraska, are you? We had that same issue. So childcare centers could use childcare management software and they could use that to track attendance, but not family childcare providers. We had to get that changed.
Yeah, we still have that in Michigan, but I was gonna say, I support a network of language diverse providers. And we've been a network informally for about 11 years, but trying to put more framework around it and talking about technology, looking for a system that takes the network hub and provides the supports for that first and foremost, and then, move to that next level of the providers having that technology and utilizing the technology. But I'm wondering if you have found anything to provide that hub support Because we do a lot of one-on-one technical assistance, case management, tracking everything. And that's what we've, like, where do we get this framework and then support the providers?
I feel like that's what we're trying to do. Like, we are the hub, but we are
Yep.
tiny. Like, it's me and 5 staff.
Me and two.
Yeah, exactly. So yes and no, I guess, would probably be the answer to your question in the back.
I just had a question. You say about bringing in staff. Have you ever thought about hiring providers who are successful using those platforms in the media in that particular program and be able to be a mentor or guide other providers to maximize their success with, managing those platforms?
Yes, and we'll talk a little bit about like peer mentor support, but in terms of like hiring people out of the field. So that's a unique challenge. So you have a position open and you have providers who are going to have to close their childcare program if you hire them to be mentors for other providers. So obviously I would never stop a provider for doing that. If they're the most qualified person for the job, that's great, but we are losing providers in droves. So is there a way to create a peer mentor support or even compensate them for that time that they're going to be spending working with other programs?
Which is tied to funding.
Which is obviously tied to
Everything's tied to funding.
funding. Wait, I still have one right there.
And nice to meet you too, Brandee. I also met you
Hi.
Also, for the coaches themselves, their tech literacy skills may
Yes.
vary, so they may need some technical assistance for them.
Yes, and especially coaches that have been in the field for a long time. And so they are used to coaching in a certain way. Like we started doing virtual observations. So which normally like a Vickers or something that would be done in the home, we started doing those via Zoom. And that was a huge, huge hurdle for our staff that are used to doing things in person. Yeah.
Finding time to learn new technology. Some of our family providers, they have 24-hour services or very late night. So by the time they're done with all the kids, they have paperwork to do, they have different, so they just don't have the time to even do technology.
Exactly. And I think that is a really good segue to talk about voices from the field. So I had really hoped to bring a provider today. I had several feelers out, but as you can imagine, closing a childcare program for a couple of days to come for a conference is really difficult for providers. But I think we just do need to take just a minute to acknowledge the voices from the field. We don't have anyone in here who is a childcare provider, do we? Okay, we have 2. Okay, great. Do you guys care if I kick on you a little?
I don't care.
Okay, you're like, I'm up for it. So what we hear from providers, I'm sure this is not going to be anything new for you guys. I just feel drained at the end of the day. I'm tired. I don't want to do tech. And just don't want to deal with it. I have my own family. I have a personal life. I have to do all my training on my own time. Really some time management. Some providers are really saying that they think they could get it done, but like when they have the time to sit down and actually do it, it's not when they're meeting with their mentor. So then they get overwhelmed or frustrated and then they just shut down. We've even had some providers who are really wondering why we're pushing all this tech on them and kind of skeptical, if I'm being perfectly honest. They're worried that the data might not be secure or there might be some privacy issues. So this was an actual quote from a provider who said, why are you pushing online parent billing? And she wanted to know if she thought we were data mining, trying to get data on children. So obviously we're not, but if that is a fear that she has, then I think we need to address it and it needs to become something that we think about as we're putting out technology and we're asking providers to adopt technology in their program. Anything else either of our providers would want to add?
I think timing is of the essence. Having the flexibility to get technical assistance at midday during nap time when I have that hour of downtime. So I'm not taking it into my own private family time. Or if I have to do it in the evenings, it's early enough to where then I can still enjoy a meal with my family. And then even Saturdays, if it's going to be one Saturday a month, that I need to show up to maximize my success with being able to manage these online entities, I'm willing to take the time, because a lot of this stuff is required or mandated by the state, and you won't be able to have a vet license without doing it. So there's a certain point, in order to continue to have a sole proprietorship or be a business or early learning provider, it's required at this point. And so I see all this, but you still have to get it done. So how can we make it feasible for providers to have access that meets their needs, while at the same time helping them continue to provide best practices to their program?
Yeah.
I do it all.
Sorry?
I do it all weekends, nights,
Same, yeah.
early morning, same, yeah, it's something I have to do, make my business viable.
And the technology is supposed to help that, right? It's
Yeah.
supposed to make it so you have more
Better,
of your
yeah.
own time and time back, but you have to get there.
But you gotta know how to use it, because I've wanted to check my computer through the window a few times, right? So I think that's some of the times it gets frustrating. So just imagine an older generation provider who has no, official education. It's all based on their experience. And then you throw a computer at her to log electronic attendance. And then you tell her you could do it on a tablet, you could do it on the computer, you could do it on your phone. And she's like, well, wait, slow down. I don't know what, and then you gotta download and scan this and do that. And then if the parent needs to create their own code, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So that's when I take into account peer mentors, relationship-based professional development strategy is the best way to go about it, where you could have a provider who can support other providers. This is what I'm doing. This is how I have set up in order to maximize their success to be able to use those programs.
Yep, I love that. Was there a comment in the back? I'm sorry?
Can I take a poll of the group real quick?
Sure.
I'd be really curious about there's the lady over there, your name? Over there, Barb. Yes,
Maria.
Maria. So Maria mentioned something about like a skepticism of people wanting to use the program, or some sort of child management software, and having somebody be able to see all that information. How many people are really experiencing that right now?
I think the
In their
biggest,
programs, like they're like having coaches or whatever it might be, seeing their attendance.
I think the biggest issue here for me is private pay versus subsidized, where private pay families do not want to be entered into a program that is connected to subsidized entities, because they're not accessing those fundings. They should not have access to their information.
And I
But are
think
they
there
providing coaching?
are two things I think we're talking about maybe a little differently. Like, one is access to data of children and things like that. One is like having someone come into your childcare program and evaluate you to look at how you're using technology, how you're doing. So like we're seeing both in our network, but I hear a lot more networks talk about like another person coming into their program to assess them, to tell them what they need to improve on. Like, that's what I'm hearing more providers say, that they're not as interested in anymore.
Well, we always offer the families an out where they do not need to participate that day when that individual is out if they don't want to.
Yeah, that's
To protect their confidentiality.
okay. So I have just a fun little poll. So, okay. So just for a second, you don't have to close your eyes, but you can if you want. Imagine your day. You're out killing it. You're either working with children or you're working with providers. You just had a great day. Even on your best day, you just feel like, yep, I'm winning. I'm getting everybody where they need to be. And then at the end of the day, I am going to come to you and I'm going to say, hey, let's build a house. Who's with me? Who wants to build a house? Early adopters. We love them. These are people, they're up for anything. They'll try anything. All right. How about if I say to you, I'm with you. I'm with you every step of the way. I'm going to be your coach. I will show you what we need to do. Who's with me now to build a house? Okay, we have a few more people. All right. So next, what if I say, I'm going to bring in content experts? Like, we're going to have plumbers, electricians. They're going to show us how to do everything. All right. Who's with me now? Still with me. All right. So I don't want to lose anybody. What if I said that while you're building the house, you can live there free? Rent free. How many I got now? All right. What if I say, okay,
Run my business out of it.
right? What if I say you can live there for a year for free? I got any more? What if I say you can have this house and it's yours forever? Lot. Okay. So why do you think we talk about this a little bit? Like how does that story or activity relate to helping providers with technology? Yeah.
The hand-holding approach to get providers to understand and feel like they have all the supports to do that. They need
Yep.
those layers.
We're gonna layer the supports. What works for one provider is not gonna work for another. What motivates one provider is not what's gonna motivate another provider. So making sure that we're trying lots of different things. There is no one size fits all to this. It really is about meeting providers where they are.
It gives a tangible outcome, goals that they can see.
Exactly. Tangible goal, outcome, incentive. Some providers are very motivated by incentives. Some are really motivated by an incentive that's not tangible. So it might just be that feather in their cap. We have a lot of providers, a lot of our early adopters who are just want to say, hey, I did that. I'm done that. I'm one of those. We call our providers elevated network providers, and they just want people to know that they're an elevated network provider. Why else?
Because you need differentiation and everybody learns different. And the idea is that if you know that this is not going anywhere, so we know that it's not going anywhere, then we have to match whatever the cognition is. So whatever they need is how we're supposed to provide.
Exactly. It's all about what they need.
Right.
Exactly. Also just put ourselves in their shoes for a second. So I know at the end of the day how tired I am. I don't know about you. I have 4 kids and they want a lot from me. I'm just gonna say that right now.
They want to hear
They want to eat every single day. It's so annoying.
No, that's not the kicker. It's all day.
That's what the school job is. I just have to worry about dinner and breakfast. No, but I know I'm tired at the end of the day. I used to have hobbies, I would say. I used to like to read. I have a lot going on too. And if somebody came to me at the end of the day and said, hey, we're gonna go build a house tonight, I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna be watching TV on my couch. And it would take a lot. It would take a lot for me to do that. And so I think we do need to remember, we are gonna talk a little bit about supports for providers that are during their workday that they can do while they're also caring for children. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But if we're going to expect a provider to work in the evening or the weekend to learn technology, we better be bringing it. We better be bringing it in a way that they can understand it and they can understand it quickly so that they're not spending all of their free time trying to learn this technology. Did you have a comment?
Well, I think the whole thing, the main thing I liked what you said is you're putting yourself in the provider's shoes. Just imagine a provider that you come out to help and you actually are willing to look through her perspective, her cultural lens of how this is all going to work. You're bringing content in her language. You have software that is able to be translated on the spot to meet their needs as well. So you're covering all those bases. I mean, they ultimately would be able to build that home. The thing is, if you show up and you don't have that, they're not even going to know how to start the foundation, right? Exactly. So it's important to recognize the big picture of being in their shoes and what that's going to entail and need from provider to provider. You might have a provider, you're going to go back 5 times to help them with the same thing, and that's okay. Exactly. And also, maybe create little cohorts of providers who are successful they can lean on for support within that media context.
Yeah, exactly. And is there anybody in this room that believes that there are some providers that just can't learn technology? Or that they, so,
Or they don't want.
or they, I think it's a difference, so if you don't want to.
No, I think there's some providers who want to, but they just cannot. They just can't, or they can't learn it at the level that the technology performs at. They just can't benefit from it.
So I will tell you, when COVID first started, we had a group of Spanish-speaking providers that were meeting on a regular basis. And we decided that we wanted that to continue because it was such a great support, but it needed to be done via Zoom. And there were a lot of people who told me these providers are never going to be able to learn Zoom. They're not going to be able to get on. They're not going to.
They nailed it. Huh?
And they killed it. They absolutely killed it. But we had to provide them instructions in Spanish. We had to coach them through it. We had to walk with them through what they needed. Many of them were using their cell phones. So we had to make sure that we could teach them on a cell phone. So it didn't do a lot of good to teach them on a computer. So I honestly believe that any provider can learn anything. These are smart women and a few men, but lots of women. And I feel like they can learn it. And I think we're doing a disservice if we just say, well, this is going to be too hard, and not meet them where they are. But I do know a couple providers that I would say, no, can't learn it, but majority. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, which is on the technology side, that why are we only expecting the family childcare provider to come and meet the technology where it is? It's like technology that's designed for someone who speaks English, designed for somebody who's a digital native, whatever. Why don't we design technology that actually meets people where they are, that is based on your phone, because that's what we know about, like, the technology usage of low-income people is that they use their phone. They're not using computers. They're not. So why are we making them use a computer if what they really are comfortable with is using a cell phone?
I think a lot of the technology companies are, they're making mobile applications, because even if you had, like, I have a laptop, but like, I don't have it with me today. I left it in the, well, I shouldn't tell you guys. I left it in the hotel room. I left it in my hotel room. But I have my phone with me. So if I want to jump on Teams and message my staff, if I, want to check Facebook, I don't know. Hopefully my kids aren't trying to get a hold of me because I did turn the ringer off.
Sandy, can you speak to, you mentioned you have a lot of rural providers that may not have internet access. Can you speak to how you serve them?
Yes, so another good segue. So, and we don't have to go in this order, and we don't have to necessarily talk about the challenges that I came up with. So I did probably our 5 most common challenges. But one of those is technology or access to technology, including internet service. So I will tell you, we didn't have to try to figure it out because they knew. If they live in that community, they know how to get internet. And if that means that they have to go drive up to the hill to get internet, then that's what they do. But they told us, so we provided some hotspots. I would say the less access to technology, the more they needed actually help utilizing it. So if they didn't have it, they didn't really know how to use it. But the logistics parts of getting internet to their community or their town was really difficult. And I don't have a ton of great answers for that. But we did provide some hotspots, but that's not going to help us on an ongoing rolling basis.
What was the cost of the hotspots and what they were?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I'll get back to you on that. Yes, and because we were only having them use it. It's not like they were using it for their family and things like that. But then we didn't have any way to monitor it to say, you get this many hours a week or something like that. So, did you?
Well, there's lots of resources available now for hotspots for those rural areas where if you're low income, you could qualify for a hotspot or a burner phone to have your essentials that you need, because we recognize that obviously digital divide, when we go back to that equity issue and getting them access to the technology they need to function within these platforms is crucial. So if you have resources to get them to apply for it, they'll mail you a hotspot. That is available now. And then, but you got to recognize that they'll mail them a hotspot, but they might need help setting that up.
Yep, exactly.
So it needs to come full circle.
Yep.
And a lot of times you might have to show up to a space to help a provider and, hotspot your phone to their devices because they have no internet. And so you guys come up with a plan. So every week you could go to the public library to use a Wi-Fi to submit your attendance report for electronic attendance. So we try to bridge that gap as best as possible by putting in a plan of action after the fact, but ultimately getting them access to it is what's crucial.
Yeah, and we would even, sometimes it would be like, they would have several cell phones and they'd be doing like a video call so we could help them hook it up. Because we are not going to their homes. Like that is just not an option for us. So, because Nebraska, if you remember that picture, is 12 hours end to end, and the majority of our population lives on eastern Nebraska. So if I'm gonna go out to rural Nebraska, it's an 8-hour drive. Hook up a hotspot.
One of the things that we did or have been doing since our governor used some stimulus dollars to try to expand broadband across your state. So it wasn't specific to childcare, but what we did is use our early childhood boards to make sure childcare was included, whether that was homes or centers. As they were applying for those grant funds, as they were bringing that in, could you make sure lines are dug or whatever has to be done so that they were included? That has helped in some of our communities as well. So it also then built more rapport with other businesses, with other, your local economic development group, things like that. So we have some success with that as well.
And we do have some federal, or not federal, but state legislation to get broadband in every community so that we don't have these, deserts or dry spots where they can't get internet. But it hasn't, of course it costs, so it's, hasn't gotten a ton of traction, but I think there's something there as well. Let's talk just a little bit about time, because I think that was like one of the first challenges somebody brought up. And I, again, just need to reiterate that learning technology or putting these supports into place is not a provider's job. Like their job is to care for children every day. And so anything that we're asking them to do, even if it's going to benefit them, is still something they're going to have to do. Either they're going to have to figure out how to do it while the children are present, or they're going to have to do it in the evening or the weekend. So just a couple things that we've done. We've had really good success. We call them happy hours. And really that is just, the term is from the time they get off work until early evening. So we try, if a provider closes at 5, then try to get them from 5 to 6. So that way it doesn't take up their entire evening. I remember I've been doing training for, I won't say, but for a long time. And it used to be, we always had trainings from 7 to 9 or 7 to 10. But that pretty much took up the entire evening for a provider. So if we can try to get that in from 5 to 6 or 5 to 7, then the provider would still have some time in the evening to do everything else that they need to do, get ready for the next day. We actually have surveyed our providers, and now that they know Zoom and they've learned Zoom, they actually prefer Zoom over a phone call. So sometimes we thought it would just be easier if we just like made some calls and then we could talk to the provider. But I think what they really like is being able to see other adults and have that face-to-face interaction. So
Kids all day.
yeah.
I'm like, hey, someone I could talk to that talks back in my language. Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't, now even that the world is starting to kind of open back up again, I actually don't see us going back to phone calls. I just see, as most people want to see your face when they're talking to you. We also have been doing a lot of nap time listen and learns. So if it's just something that it's not super technical and it's just something we want the providers to be able to get the information, we'll host those over nap time, fully recognizing that a lot of providers don't get a nap time. So, but they can have their camera off and their don't have to have their mic on. It's not for in-service credit. It's really just so that they can get the information at a time that works for them. Okay, so I want to just have like a little poll. So there's kind of two schools of thought when you're learning technology. Do you immerse yourself in it and just get it done as fast as humanly possible? Or do you go slow, break it down into individual little steps and just take a lot of time until you finally learn it? So who thinks that getting it done quickly is the best way to do it? Hands up. Who said, don't be shy, like there's no wrong answer here. Everybody's like, oh, maybe. Who thinks break it down in small little individual pieces and, okay, a lot more. Like I said, there's no right answer. It's different for every provider. It's different, I know for me, something, I come onto Facebook like super easy. It's like a weekend and then I'm like scrolling through, posting things. But then other technology, I've had to really break it down. The one thing I would say about this is just be careful when you're breaking it down that you're not losing momentum, or that you're not having to relearn what you learned the last time. If too much time is in there, it's really difficult.
I have a question for you. So for instance, a new technology is being brought to a provider. Are you in your organization training them on it, or are you letting the technology company do the implementation?
So in a perfect world, we let the technology company do the implementation, but I can tell you what happens a lot of times is that the technology company comes in, trains the provider, and then when they meet with their mentor, then they say, well, I didn't want to say, but I didn't really understand this. Can you walk me through it again? Which is not bad. That's actually fine. So we just find that it's good if our staff understand the technology as well. And it's just a teachable moment in that mentoring session. So we could say like, maybe you should go back to the company and ask them, but I think it just works easier if we can just go through it again.
It's almost like training the trainer type of model.
Exactly. And if it's super technical or they're having like a lot of different issues, we will refer them back to the company. I mean, that's not our role, but if we can at least say, oh yeah, you just forgot to click this button before you click those buttons, then it's good that we know how to do that. Do you have a question?
I just want to second that. That's what we do in our system as well. Dan and I work with our providers and our software companies. Training, so no, losing that momentum, and then they can go and work with the providers to learn that knowledge as well. No matter where you go, you're going to find the answer.
Exactly. And I'm just happy that they're asking the questions instead of, we do have some providers who just won't ask, and then 3 months later, we'll be like, okay, how's this going? And they're like, I'm not using that. I'm like, why? Well, I didn't know how to do that. And I'm like, oh, you should have told us that. Other ideas that you guys have found that work really well to help address time with a provider?
Kind of to go along with the Zoom, I use a lot of our providers, especially because when you're on Zoom, you can't access other screens, or they can't always share screens. So a lot of our providers like to use FaceTime, because then if I need to flip the screen and show them on my computer, or if they need to flip their screen and show like what they're not finding, sometimes that works better than the Zoom calls.
Okay, that's great. I am not an Apple user, so I did not know that.
Or any kind of those.
Yeah, Facebook Messenger. Hold on, we'll go here.
I do want to mention that with Zoom, the host has the option to host screen sharing. You can check that off, or with the host is can check that off when creating the session.
Okay.
The other thing that we've done to help with the time issue is we've like double incentivized it. They're learning how to use the technology, but we've also created officially registry credits. So they're getting continuing education hours to learn how to use the system.
For credit, like we would have a difficult time in Nebraska getting that approved for credit, I would think. I could be very creative, maybe. Did you have something for about time?
Excuse me. Yes, just a couple of things as we had started our shared service network with our family child care providers. A few things, relationship building was huge for us between the providers and between the organizations that supported us in the child care management system. That was really, really huge. And so in doing that, a lot of when we ask providers about their needs, when we would follow up with them, they basically are like, no, they're handling it. We don't have any questions, which was great for us. One of the big things that we had to look at was readiness for change. The providers who are in the shared service network, this was what they wanted to do, and they wish that this was available to them before they started their businesses. We have some people who have been in business for 20 years and some who have been in business for 3 years, and they wish they would have had this at the beginning. When we started this, we really pushed on the benefits of having a child care management system. Most of them were doing doing things with pencil and paper, and having more time being spent with their children in their programs was very, very important to them. And now that we've had probably 80% of them that have completed their onboarding at their time, own, space and time, they're seeing the benefits of being able to spend more time with their children. So
I think that's perfect. And like I said, I felt like over incentivized participation. And we found that there were just some people who didn't want to do it and that they just wanted the incentive. But what we really need them to do is recognize that they want that and they need to do that in order to strengthen their business, grow their business. So I agree with that. Where we've also had really good success is with new providers. So we do have a licensing toolkit program. And I don't know if a lot of those providers are younger, they're just starting in the field, but I really do think starting your business with that in place and knowing that you want to run your business that way, we've had really good success there. Okay, so let's talk about cost a little bit. So is everybody providing your services free to providers, or does anybody let me ask that differently. Does anybody charge for their software? Okay. Have you always, or did you start out free?
this is our first year and we wanted the providers to have buy-in. And so we charged them $100.
Okay.
A small fee because we wanted them to have buy-in. Again, these were providers that were ready for change. And so, yeah, they just had to $100.
Okay. Did you say you guys?
Yes, we also charge $100.
Is that for the year or forever? Or?
Interesting though, ours is not only on the technology. We charge $100 an hour for coaching. And the coaching is.
Do you hear the room?
Whatever
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Well, but it does not cover our costs.
No, not at all.
Because for the provider, yeah, $100, it sounds like a lot, it's not for an hour. But it takes us in the back office hours and hours and hours to prepare and do it, clean up and arrange. So it may turn out to be like $10 an hour. Maybe that they're paying us.
Okay.
But that's how it looks on paper.
That's interesting.
Can I ask you, have a lot of people that pay us, or like you have like a good,
Right. We don't have a lot of people. We have a few, but really what we learned over the last couple of years is that they really were missing the contact and the deep coaching that we bring to it.
I think
we're rebuilding.
Okay. So my question, does this state have a quality rating system where what we call it is early achievers, where you rate 3 to 5 stars, and that coaching is free, that entails where the coach comes out to help set up your environments, your learning structures and stuff like that. Is that something that's going on here?
So we have a quality rating improvement system, but the way that we differ a little bit, they have a coaching component, but it's just on the pedagogy side, just on quality environment side. They don't do any business coaching. And we don't call our coaches, we call them mentors, because they've all been providers. They've all been family child care providers at one point, and that what they're really doing is helping a provider meet their own goals. We don't set goals for the provider. We give the provider information and let them set their own goals.
We'll meet program standards with a level of best practices, right?
That really is up to the provider and for our network to decide for themselves. We can provide them information if they're like, what is best practice in this? But if they decide.
You provide to help maximize their success for that rating, or is it something separate?
It's whatever they want because they're paying for it.
And it's all different, so it might be business, might be technology, might be.
I'd be curious to like compare like a paid coaching model versus a free coaching model. Sometimes, you know, I just wonder about having skin in the game, if a provider would be more invested. Did you have a comment?
Josie and I work together. We've been doing this for 22 years. We've had a network. We're an individual organization in Colorado Springs. We had a network when we've been big, we've been smaller, and we were much bigger when it was free. We were funded. We had a huge grant, we were funded with Kellogg. When we weren't funded, it went to a much smaller network. But I wonder if we aren't sometimes doing a disservice to ourselves by not having skin in the game. I really think that it's important for us as professionals to understand we're professionals and have some buy-in to that professionalization, rather than thinking that everything should come to us for free, because I wonder about our profession.
Yeah.
I think
not only that, I believe that we as an age, like at our age, we become over saturated with throwing too much free stuff. We give laptops, we give tablets, we give this. And at the end of the day, we're at our ends with, and they still don't have the tools necessary to be able to use any of it. So I agree. I love the buy-in idea. Thanks for sharing it.
And I like the way that we had set up our network was in the tiers of service. So really our providers can come in and be a tier 1 in our program and never do anything else. They have access to our digital resources. It doesn't cost us a lot. We're already paying for that, whether we have 50 people using the website or we have 500 people using the website. But then as the programs and services that they access increase, then so does what we expect of them back. And we are probably, I think, just talking to other providers that are, or organizations that are providing child care management software, we require full utilization of the tool. So I will caveat that we're not there yet, but we do require it. Our providers sign a participation agreement when they start, which says that they're agreeing to at least try all the aspects of the tool. So we're not quite there yet, but that's our hope, because really if we're going to be paying for this for them, we need them to use it so we can show that it actually works. And then the hope is that when it actually works, the provider would see the benefit, they would see the value in the software, and then they would pay for it themselves.
Do you find that providers are drawn to use one part of the software, but not all of the functionality?
Oh my gosh, they love the website. They love having a website. They really don't want to use access parent billing. That's for us, what we've found is they don't want to put their parents on automatic parent billing. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more too. I guess we should talk about costs really quick. How are we doing on time? Like I said, there are state, federal, private funding. Sometimes it's not just the cost for the technology, but also costs like what they're putting the technology on. So like I think somebody had said, we did purchase laptops for some of our providers, not all of our providers. We've done tablets. What we found was that we bought laptops for providers, but they didn't use them. The next Zoom call I was on with them, they were on their phone. I was like, I know I bought you a laptop, but they didn't know how to set it up. They didn't know how to install the software. So we had to really rethink that a little bit. And then now we have an IT person on staff who works with them to make sure that they have their technology set up if we're going to purchase it for them. Does anybody else buy? I know one person said they buy laptops and tablets. Anybody else? Yeah.
I was gonna make a comment about that, because when we bought the laptops, we bought the Geek Squad. We're like, oh, that'll take care of all the IT. They're calling us. How do we get a hold of Geek Squad? Like, we should have just kept the money and had an IT person on staff.
Because they have the relationship with you guys.
That's the relationship based coaching. It's that's the whole piece of like, they need us. And then I'm wondering, when is it, like you were saying, that they need to step up and call the Geek Squad
themselves, but then some of them did, and the Geek Squad basically went in and just did it for them. And they didn't get any information from them, or it wasn't delivered in a way they could learn
Digest
it. So I'm like back to us delivering the service again. So that was a mistake.
And I think I've heard this theme kind of run across a few different times. It's the relationship. So you have the relationship with the provider. They know you're nice. They're not going to make you, you're not going to make them feel dumb for asking the question. And so it's kind of balancing that. Do we turn them over to the experts who can do it for them or who can really tell them? Or do we train our staff, at least the basics, so that they can move the provider forward?
We did some business training for a number of years. And then there was a few providers that had my eye an aha moment. And they actually hired an office manager. So instead of hiring, I'm good at the teaching part, but I'm terrible at the office part. Computer stuff. And it was much more cost effective for them to hire someone for 5 hours a week instead of what we were seeing before that, which was I need an assistant teacher. I can't handle all of it. Bring somebody in 20 hours a week. And I can share with you that the few people that did that, that knew that that was a need that they had, are excelling greatly because they spoke the truth to themselves. Like, I am terrible at this part.
I love that idea. I mean, this is what I just took from the session. Yeah, I think.
So, I mean,
even 5 hours a week,
Why are
yeah.
we struggling against our own grain? At my house, it would be landscaping. I'm not gonna do it.
Cleaning bathroom. No, I think that's an excellent point. And, the provider doesn't have to be good at everything. They don't, same thing I tell my
And if
kids.
they take that, like it's another field that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's why I have an accountant.
Okay.
Something we also did before even starting our shared service network, were assessing the providers to find out what their need was. And that helped us to know what we needed to focus on. And so, because at first we were thinking, oh, we're gonna get them laptops and we were gonna get them, all this stuff, and that was not a need for them. And so they kind of helped us to really focus in on what their needs were.
And not to get totally sidetracked on that, but like, is anybody else's providers feeling over surveyed? And they just don't, like if I sent them another survey, they seriously would come and conclude, what are some other ways that you can gather information about what providers need without surveying them?
So the way we did it, we called them empathy interviews because it wasn't really a survey. We really wanted to understand what they were going through and how different it looks between provider to provider, right? So we called them empathy interviews that we did in order before establishing our shared services and what they would like to see established in order to support providers. I mean, we had from providers who had just graduated the mentorship program and just been licensed to become providers. And then you have the OGs that have been around for 30 years, right? And then we had center-based care to also give that perspective. And I think we ended up coming up with like 175 different empathy interviews throughout the whole state, and then coming together and itemizing what was a priority through all that. So an interview, I think, is completely different because you're getting a larger perspective of what their needs are, and sometimes they're intertwined with other needs. So you kind of see the bigger picture than just select A, B, or C, because it could really boggle it down to we don't really know what C is unless you talk to them and really want to find out what that is in association, let's say, to technology, what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and we try to, like, when we do our mentoring sessions, we try to have like a focused question. So it doesn't feel like a survey or whatever, but it's just like, hey, tell me your thoughts on this, just to gather information. And then we also have an advisory council. So I think there's a session maybe tomorrow on co-designing your staff family childcare network. And I think it's kind of the same concept. We have 20 providers from across the state that serve on a council, and then they provide feedback. Anytime we're going to offer a new program or we're thinking about offering a new program, getting them to weigh in, like, what are we not thinking about? Is this even something that you need or want?
So going back to member fees, is Nebraska ever going to implement a member fee? And if so, what is your plan? How do you plan on billing the providers? Are you gonna have to set up a billing department of your own for your SSA?
Not when I work there. No, what I have said is that I would not charge a provider unless I could show her that she had saved that much money.
What's the benchmark for that?
Right now, I don't have one. And I can't imagine in the state we're living right now that a provider would ever be able to pay for our services. They just wouldn't do it. So I don't know, maybe a handful, but I'm interested to maybe talk a little bit more about what you guys are offering. But I see it in Nebraska happening. So Nebraska is a preschool development grant state right now. And then we also have ARPA funding. We also have 3 private funders. And the collaborative is a strategic initiative, the Buffett Early Childhood Fund. So don't be mad at me. So we do have that funding, but if that's not promised or forever either. Any other questions? Okay.
There's some Q&A. There's some questions in the
Questions in the chat?
and some responses.
Is someone in the chat responding?
I'm just letting them know to add their questions in here.
Okay.
But people are sharing their responses to your questions and everyone else's questions.
Okay, great. All right. Is there any questions you could just ask me quickly?
Well, the slides, the question was, will the slides be available? They're in the Attendify app.
Yeah, the slides are in the app. And any of the things that I've talked about that we offer, if you give me your business card and just write what you want to see, like our participation agreement, I would be happy to send anyone. We have a provider manual for most of our programs that I'd be happy to send. You can just let me know that. My slides aren't advancing. Do you know why? There we go. Okay. So I think we've kind of talked a little bit already about no technology experience or low tech literacy. I honestly believe that they can learn it if they choose to and they want to. I think there's something to be said about one-on-one training versus group training. We tried a lot of group training for technology and it just does not seem to work very well. Has anybody had good success with doing group technology training? Yeah.
Yeah, so back in 2018, Save the Children went in post Hurricane Harvey and funded a resilience cohort of 50 childcare providers to adopt technology. And they would meet once a month and do it as a group. And 4 years later, they're still using their technology. So we have great success doing it as a group. It created sort of like mentorship with those that were super great at technology and those that were a little on the low tech side.
Was it in person or virtual?
They did virtual and then they met face to face once a month.
Once a month, okay.
So that was our intent, and I'm so happy to hear that worked out for you guys, but we found I really hope that was our intent. I'm sorry, Felicia from Louisiana. We started a Wonder School pilot and we started out with the group, but we found that everybody's business levels are different. Everyone's needs are different. And so I worked with Megan, we tried to separate as best as we could to match and align needs. And so now we work in a smaller group where maybe it's 3 or 4 providers who are like key, they are ringleaders. They got the website flowing, they're using the apps, they're checking in, they're doing attendance, they're doing all of that. And so it's kind of like tiers, but we just had to break it out and just change our approach.
I think that and the fact that some providers are more comfortable with things not being perfect.
Absolutely.
So like we have some providers who are and just a little bit about the collaborative, like we do weird stuff. Like we try stuff nobody's tried before because I've been in this field 30 years and I'm tired of doing the same thing and getting the same result. So we do things and we're very upfront with providers. We're like, we don't know if this is gonna work. We don't know if this is gonna help. We're gonna find out though. And so we've just learned some providers are much more comfortable with, you know, this failed, or we shouldn't say ever failed, but maybe just a lesson learned. So I think those two things married together are important.
And I'm just gonna reiterate, I wanna tie back to, I think you should take that to an advantage. So providers who are excelling within these platforms should be a mentor to providers who are struggling and receive compensation for that. In one way or another, if you're able to tie in that funding, an hourly TA assistance to fellow providers during nap time, in the evenings, or meet them on the weekends, I think it should be used to your benefit to build that relationship-based professional development, that one-on-one support where they feel comfortable instead of a IT or another technical assistance person, because they're gonna speak their same language. They know what they're going through within their program. So I think a way to tap into that and use it to your advantage is crucial.
Yeah, I like that idea. And we incentivize a lot of our programs, but we don't incentivize the mentorship as much. And so I think there's definitely something we can do.
To lighten up the workload if you do have to do that.
Right. I love this cartoon. We need tech support. And then the child is in the background saying call. I don't know how many times my teenager has had to come up and fix my technology. But that is one thing, sometimes providers are scared to ask people they know. Maybe they know someone who can help them. That's something we've seen success with, especially being not being able to be there in person. Because if a provider actually needs someone who can sit next to her and see that she's accidentally hitting the space bar at the end of her password, then we need somebody who can do that. And so just developing some of those relationships, like you said, and it could be other providers in the area. Yeah.
Peer mentor.
And we want them to develop those relationships with people in their area anyway. Did you have a comment?
I wonder if there's a way to leverage parents. So I'm curious, because in centers it's different. Like they expect a phone, they expect to scan it, they expect certain things. So in family childcare, I'm wondering what the parent feeling or vibe is, and if that's a way we can help, because they're younger now, right? They're younger, they're into technology, and so I just wonder, have you explored that or?
A related thought. Family. So definitely starting to look at families as a support for the provider, but also helping the provider have a difficult conversation with her family. So that is typically not something we see of childcare providers, that they're really comfortable with conflict. So usually providers are much more go with the flow, don't want to upset their clients, their customers, and I get that completely. But I do talk to providers a lot about mentoring support that their parents can give them. So if you have a parent in your program who is an IT specialist, see if you can swap some childcare for some IT support. So there are ways that you can get that. One thing that we're starting to think about is incentives for parents to participate as well. So I feel like we got the providers really excited about technology and got them on board and they were utilizing, but then when it came to having their parents enroll the children, having their parents utilize the app, do check in and check out, things like that, that's kind of where the progression stopped. And so right now we're just investigating, like, are there incentives that we could provide to parents to get them to be using it too? Because I feel like some of the same challenges that we have with providers, we're having with parents. So the other thing is, and what I always tell providers is that it's not a parent's decision how you run your program. And so I always use the example that State Farm does not ask me how I want to pay my car insurance. They say, give us your banking, your routing and your checking, whatever, and we're going to take this out on the 28th of every month. And I say, okay, but why is it that when a provider says to a parent, hey, I'm using a technology system now to do my billing, that the parent's like, I don't want to do that. And the provider says, okay.
I mean, fear of losing a parent.
Exactly. Some of it's just having that difficult conversation. So we've been providing providers like scripts on how to talk to their parents. Also some one-on-one coaching where we are the parents and the provider is telling us, so the provider can get used to having that conversation. Also providing them information without getting into specifics, but there are other people in the same area that are using similar systems. So a parent doesn't feel like, how come this childcare program is using this system, but nobody else is. But I always tell providers, a parent never has a problem using Venmo, but then they have a problem using our technology system. Because Venmo puts the parent in the driver's seat of when they pay you, whereas in the technology system doesn't. So I think there's a lot of different avenues to come at it, many of which are the same challenges that we have with providers. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add in Arizona, we're from Arizona, I'm Carl Hofftown, but we're seeing the exact opposite. So for our providers who are really resistant to technology, and we can help them stretch, meet those barriers. I just wanted to put a positive spin on all of this. Is this the parents, once they embrace it and they're embracing it because they are the young techie millennials and they're so excited and they're so happy about the ease of pay, then we see a switch in providers. My families love this. My families love this. They're so engaged. My teachers, it's often young teachers sometimes. So the teachers are engaged, and so they get almost the opposite. But and so that we have seen that a lot, and it's been really positive.
That's great.
Yeah.
Do you have any samples of that dialogue that you would be able to share? Because that has been our number one barrier was with getting the families transition.
Yeah, just put it, give me your business card or sticky note or whatever, it doesn't matter. We also have a couple documents that we use with families. We give to the providers, the provider gives to the families, that talks about the benefits of online billing and what benefits the parent as well as the provider. So that way a parent knows that there are benefits for them too. They don't have to wait for their
state. It's a mandate the state's just made. I need everybody on board. If you don't sign it, you can't come.
And some providers are much more comfortable with that than others, I would say. And I would not have a problem with it at all. That's probably why I'm not a childcare provider anymore. How are we doing? Oh, we got 5 minutes left. Okay. And then this was just talking about data sharing and privacy, which we kind of already talked about. So. And of course I can't give it to you again. One thing about trying to do that, I think it's, I'm just going to briefly touch on misinformation in social media. I tell you, at least once a week, I have a provider call me and say, guess who said what on social media? Some of it, I'm just going to be honest, and my CEO is here somewhere and she would probably disagree with me, but I feel like I have to address that at least some of the time because it does spread misinformation. And so it's maybe not a matter of me getting on there and like posting something myself, but I kind of started coaching providers. So that provider who calls me and says, can you believe what so-and-so said on Facebook? And I say, what would be really helpful if you posted this? Because it comes from you, it's going to sound a lot better than if it comes from me. And then the other thing is just really coaching providers to tell other providers, like you should call into NECC's office and talk to someone about that. And then we also do use our advisory council to help us combat misinformation posted on social media. And then I think we've kind of already covered reliable technology. I think community options, we talked about providing the internet or the hotspot, and then using parents to help with that. And then my contact information. I just want to share this quote with you because I love it. It makes me feel happy, especially on a day when I'm dealing with misinformation posted on technology and social media. But it says, the work you are doing benefits childcare providers across the state, but more importantly, it sets in motion a benefit to children which will span generations. Every childcare provider believes that there is no more important work than strengthening children. By strengthening childcare providers, you are the genesis of that positive cycle. Thank you on behalf of childcare providers, the children they love, and the families they partner with. I love this quote, but I also would like to tell you that the provider who asked if we were data mining is the same provider that wrote this quote. So I want you to remember, it could be the difference in the day. So sometimes they're our best advocates, sometimes they're questioning what we're doing, but at the end of the day, if we are helping support children, families, and providers, then I call it a win. Thank you very much. If you have any questions.